Good morning and welcome to CMG's webinar, What's New in General Release 2016.10. My name is Jason Close and I'm the Canadian Regional Sales Manager at CMG. I'm very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Jeremy Walter, currently an account manager for our Canadian customers. Jeremy joined CMG in 2009 as a reservoir simulation engineer who focused on SAGD and thermal simulation for heavy oil reservoirs, as well as geomechanics, CO2 EOR recovery processes, CO2 sequestration, and optimization. He used his expertise in these areas to develop many of the current training courses we offer. Since joining the sales team in 2013, he's done a terrific job of supporting his customer base using his strong technical knowledge. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines. At the end of his presentation, he'll be able to answer your questions. Please submit them throughout the webinar using the chat window on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. The recording of this presentation will be posted to our website within the next 24 hours, and you'll each receive a link to download and view the webinar and presentation materials. I think that covers the housekeeping items, so I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Thanks for the introduction, Jason. I have had the pleasure on multiple occasions through the years providing the What's New presentation. This webinar is focused on the 2016 general release that was made available recently for download on our website. As with previous releases, there is obviously not enough time to cover everything that has been developed and updated in the software. And so this webinar is meant to provide you with the most pertinent features and information. As such, though, I recommend viewing the What's New documentation and manuals for additional information on what I will cover here today, as well as some of the other features that I'm not able to get to. These documents can be found both in the install of the new software as well as on the website in our client area. If you have any questions in trying to find those, please feel free to, of course, contact CMG. In terms of the agenda, this year I'm actually changing the order up a bit by beginning with updates to results. As you will soon see, the magnitude of changes is likely to affect most of the users of CMG. I will then move on to enhancements common to the simulators, followed by more simulator-specific updates. From there, I'll continue with updates associated with the integrated analysis and optimization workflows in the CMOS tool, and end with preprocessing applications, Builder, and WinProp. So starting with results, well, the only thing that's changed is everything. In this release, you will have access to the new results tool. The developer set out to create an optimized program focused on speed, memory, and data management, workflows, and ease of use, which is positioned to replace the previous results graph and 3D programs. To begin, here is a screen capture of the new results interface. As you can note, we've included a lot of new features in here, including a new ribbon menu bar across the top. We also have new filtering and sorting options, which you can see shown here in the bottom. You can choose different types of data, wells, and parameters, and it will sort based on what's actually available. We also have automatic plotting and repeat plotting capabilities built into this, which I'll discuss here in a bit. The 3D viewer has also been integrated into the same application and allows for easier transitioning between viewing of results both graphically, as you just saw, and in 3D, rather than the need to switch between applications. To support this new application, a new results file type has been introduced. Now this is meant to replace the previous IRF and MRF formats. The new format that you'll be hearing a lot more about starting now and going forward, is called SR3. And it's focused on a new compressed, smaller file size, which allows for faster loading and quicker analysis of results. This new format is created by default for all 3 simulators in the 2016 release. The new format has the benefit of significantly improving the reading of data. This means the ability to in large memory-intensive files in seconds. With the compression, you can also expect file sizes that are a fair bit smaller than the current MRF files, greater than 50% in some cases. This not only speeds up loading and visualization of results, but also minimizes the disk space that's typically used in the storing of results files. Overall, tasks can be performed much faster, plotting, interacting with 3D, and of course the recurrent reading of results as runs are still ongoing and updating. From a usability perspective, the new ribbon menu will allow you to easily find commonly used options such as plot creation, summary exports, and unit changes. Data filtering also allows for the seamless ability to find the wells and parameters you want to plot quickly and easily. This functionality is available in all sections where the data selection is prompted, specifically when you're creating plots or looking at exporting items. Some other usability-related items include the ability to define templates for your commonly used plots, allowing for more complete customization of plot types, colors, etc., which can be applied to any model that is loaded into results. And the neat thing is that when you load a new results file, it will make these plots instantly for any well with the applicable information. And that goes back to the ability of using some automatic repeat plot capabilities now. So along these lines, as I previously alluded to, the program contains this automatic repeat capability. And so this lets the user create a custom plot, and as long as the property is repeatable to other wells, data sets, etc., it will automatically create plots for it. One example of this is the oil, water, and gas plots that are automatically created by default upon loading a file. And that's just the default template that's there with results. Of course, you can add your own templates like I just mentioned though. So with this, the analysis of results is more efficient as less time would then be taken on creating the plots that you need. Finally, we have also added something called a plot dashboard. And this allows you to now combine both graphical and 3D views for multiple models even in a single space to view and analyze the results. You can sync them all up with time, even in order to see how your process behaves, both numerically and visually at very specific points in time and through the data sets. Now, as you can obviously tell, there's a lot to the new results. I mean, even just based on the screen captures I showed you, there are many options in there which I didn't even touch on in these slides. Due to the unfortunate lack of time here today, I'm unable to go through everything. However, we will be hosting a follow-up webinar to this one focused solely on the new results. This is scheduled for September 22nd, so please be on the lookout for our emails and the website link to register for it. And of course, as I mentioned, if you have any questions on it, feel free to let us know in the meantime. Getting into some of the common code that's similar or shared between the simulators, let's start with some updates on runtime enhancements. Specifically, we made some additional parallelization options for compaction dilation calculations as well as non-Darcy flow and some of the well terms like the wellhead pressure calculation. We've also had significant improvements in the Jacobian build speed that's applicable to all three simulators. And with these, also the optimization for parallelizing on higher numbers of core counts. Overall, you should be seeing faster model run times in this release. This feature is something that I find particularly interesting and will be very useful to quite a few folks, I think. It's the ability to restart based on an elapsed time. Now, previously, when we go to run a long data set, or large data set, we would typically put in points within the data set itself that we want to write a restart record that we can actually start the run from again sometime in the future. Now, sometimes this is done to create prediction type cases based on a certain run. Sometimes it's just due to the fact that you want to make sure that that if there's any sort of computer or server issue, you have a saving point from your run and you're not having to rerun things again needlessly. However, in some cases, it may take a bit of time to go between those points. And what happens if you have some sort of server crash or computer or power outage in that time frame? For that reason, the new elapsed time feature allows you to put in a real-world time for it to write the restarts based on. So let's say, for instance, every 3 hours. And so if I start the run now, 3 hours from now, it'll write out a restart record. After 3 hours from there, it'll update it with another one. And it'll keep going. That way, the most run time you would ever actually lose is 3 hours. And you can put in any number you want. So pretty neat. Individual well completions. This relates to the ability to modify the per layer, per perforation status, or the well index without needing to redefine the entire well. Since the well is no longer being redefined, we have seen a reduction in runtime for some models. This also increases flexibility and allows for CMG to couple well parameters to some third-party external softwares which can control these accordingly. This, again, is available for all 3 simulators. Grid module enhancements were some user requested options that we added, such as the ability of specifying your own pore volume, at which point the block porosity would actually be adjusted accordingly. You also have the ability of directly inputting the transmissibility for all 3 directions IJK. This is an alternative to the previously used method of using transmissibility multipliers to obtain the transmissibility that you require. So this is much more direct. And then we've had the ability of setting pore volume cutoffs for matrix grid blocks for a while. We now have the ability of doing that for fractured grid blocks also. And this helps when you're dealing with very, very small pore volumes that could cause some numerical issues. They're not really adding much in terms of volume or flow to your model. They're just kind of more cumbersome than anything. This can help kind of eliminate some of those issues. Now, previously, if you had multiple initialization regions that were defined in a model, then they would be in communication starting initialization of the model, right, just right off the bat, even if they have different fluids. Now, with this new option of threshold pressure, which is available in IMEX and STARs, you can control this communication by setting a pressure differential threshold that needs to be overcome prior to the flow occurring. Now, once this happens, it can either behave elastically, meaning that it closes the communication off if you drop below the threshold, or it can close plastically, meaning that the communication would actually still persist to some amount or some degree after the pressure's equilibrated or dropped down again, the differential. Now, overall, this of course means that you can get a much more accurate representation of your geology and the fluid flow in the reservoir, and of course better history matching and prediction results with that. Now, many of you might know we have a Geomechanics module which is coupled to both STARS and Gem. This year, based on some client requests, we added the direct relationship between stress and permeability via a table input. Previously, whenever you wanted to kind of go from a calculation of stress to how it would affect your perm in your actual flow grid, you would first have to calculate the stress, then the strain, then the deformation, and then how that would relate to the permeability. Now, while this is a very commonly used method, going directly from stress to perm is something that we're starting to see more and more coming out of laboratory analysis. Now we can directly input that on a per rock type basis. Another new feature is the jointed rock mass modeling. Now this is for allowing for larger deformations in blocks that contain mini fractures, meaning that they're non-continuous. They have joints or discrete joints in the rock itself. What this typically means is that while you may apply the same constitutive model to it, you would expect there to be a higher degree of deformation to occur and displacement to occur due to the fact that it's not one solid piece of rock in that grid. Right now this applies to the elastic models, and we're looking at applying to plastic models as well. Lastly, in the geomechanics side is the ability to now extend the geomechanics grid in the IJK directions, or the side burden, overburden, underburden. Now, the way that we have generally looked at modeling these areas in the past is one of two ways. The default is to actually take your flow model and create a finite element grid from that that's used for the geomechanics. The problem is if you want to model these other areas, you actually have to create a flow model that covers those. The second approach was to create a standalone geomechanical grid, otherwise known as a geogrid, which extends out accordingly. But this, of course, can also be a little bit cumbersome because you're creating an entirely second grid. The new option allows you just to take the finite element grid from the first approach that's defaulted to the size of the flow model and then extend it accordingly, in essence creating its own geomechanical grid, the geogrid. So a very, very neat feature that I think a lot of the folks using the software for geomechanics will find quite useful. At this point, I'm going to get into some of the more simulator-specific items, and I'm going to start with IMEX. IMEX is our black oil simulator. This year, we've had the addition of the ability to model special core analysis experiments, otherwise known as SCAL. SCAL experiments are typically used in our industry to get a good understanding of the relative permeability and capillary pressures for a particular slice of core or rock. Now, the method that's required to actually model something like this requires the centrifugal force. And previously, we didn't have this capability inside the simulators. With the addition of the ability to model centrifugal forces, we now can actually model these types of experiments, which will allow you to gain a better understanding and matching to what you're actually finding in the lab. Perforation scanning was implemented to help speed up runs which saw considerable changes in the wells and the definitions over the course of data sets. What this in essence does is it looks through the entire wells and recurrence section of your model as it's initializing. It then determines and figures out where all of the well changes or definitions come into play, meaning where you have recompletions, where you have new wells coming online or being defined, and it creates the pointer generation for the solvers at initialization based on all of that. What this does is it means that it doesn't have to regenerate that every single time it comes across one of these. Now, in models with lots of wells, such as the one that is shown here, 2.2 million cells, 2,800 wells that were defined at different points in the model, you can see quite large improvements just through this one option. In this case, 24% improvement in the runtime. Moving into STARs, as many of you know, STARs is our steam thermal advanced process reservoir simulator. We've had some updates in the modeling of soft steam constraints. And what I mean by soft steam constraint, basically we've always had, or for a very long time, we've had the ability of modeling and controlling the amount of steam that's entering into the wellbore from the reservoir as people look at in the field. The problem is that we were typically using a hard constraint, which, while not completely wrong, doesn't necessarily completely mimic the real field operations either. In the field, they typically will have a range of choke positions that they'll choose instead in order to control their subcool or the amount of steam production. With the new soft constraint, we now have the ability of setting a range of values instead of using the single hard constraint value. It's available for the steam trap, the steam rate constraint, and it has a couple benefits to it. Not only does it closely mimic the real field operations much closer, but it also will help speed up some of your simulation run times, particularly in runs where you had oscillations, numerical instability due to the method that some of the hard constraints might take. Meaning, you would hit a hard constraint, you would switch over to a different one and flip-flop, which might cause the oscillations you see there in red, the graph on the right. Whereas the soft constraints, you now have a bounds and it's able to converge much nicer. Flexwell is our wellbore tool, fully transient tool that's integrated in STARs. Through a user request, we added an additional density mixing rule for choosing when you have a fluid flowing from the Flexwell to the reservoir block. Now this additional density mixing allows you the flexibility when trying to match properties inside the Flexwell with your actual field data or an analytical analysis. On Flexwell initialization, we now have the ability of overriding what the default initialization would be, where it would typically decide the fluids and compositions, by being able to put in user-defined saturations and fluid compositions inside the Flexwells. So you can actually start the well off with the fluids that you would expect to be there based on your completions or how it should be defined. And they've also done quite a bit of work in terms of overall numerical improvements, meaning that the Flexwell has had code changes that have increased both the stability and the robustness in order to improve the overall run times when you're running with Flexwell. In terms of geochemistry and STARs, improvements were made for the modeling of geochemical reactions and processes like alkaline surfactant polymer, low salinity water flooding, and pH-dependent absorption. And this is done by reservoir rock and fluid reactions, which include aqueous electrolyte chemistry, precipitation, dissolution of minerals, and ion exchange reactions with reservoir clays. And the Builder wizard has subsequently been improved for the modeling of the ASP and low salinity water flooding processes that incorporate these geochem options. As I mentioned previously, in the common code, we did some work in terms of speeding up. On the STAR side particularly, we did have some additional solver improvements, also some looks and improvements at how the memory management was done in terms of the allocation and access from the memory side, and then some additional improvements on how we had speed-ups for higher core counts. Overall, as I mentioned previously, you should be seeing faster run times in many cases when using the new STARs. Just to give you a couple examples, here on the right-hand side, I'm showing a steam flooding example, 2.8 million cells, 600 wells, and we see about a 15% reduction in the elapsed time just from these changes alone. For SAGD, 1.4 million cell model with 50 wells, we saw about an 11% reduction in the runtime. And an air injection data set, which typically is highly complex, you have a lot of reactions and other things going on in there, that we had a 17% reduction. So no matter the process, we're seeing reductions across the board, which is always something you want to see. Lastly, for the simulator specific, I'm going to talk a bit about GEM. GEM is our generalized equation of state reservoir simulation software where we actually model the full equation of state. It's fully compositional. Now, I've personally, in my past life as an engineer, done quite a bit of work in terms of the use of the stoichiometry and geochemistry inside GEM. So these particular changes I was quite pleased to see. The first one is that stoichiometry is now obtained directly from reactions that you input, meaning that it eliminates the need for a separate user-specific stoichiometric parameter definition. And this makes things much more intuitive, user-friendly, decreases the amount of work you need in setting this type of model up. Along those same lines, we now have an internal calculation for the equilibrium rate annihilation matrix. Again, for those of you that have had to build an annihilation matrix by hand before, based on this stoichiometry, you can definitely understand the benefit to it just calculating it for you now. We also can model polymers and foam injection with geochemistry in GEM, which is really neat. And this helps us study the effects of geochemistry on some of these chemical recovery processes, particularly how ion exchange can play a possible pretty large role in some of these. A good example of that is, of course, when you inject a polymer or a foam, and you could trigger a mineral dissolution or precipitation in the reservoir if you have a high CO2 contents. It's almost quite similar to doing kind of a CO2 EOR or CO2 sequestration in some cases, depending on how the water chemistry and rock chemistry interact. And as with STARS, we also had some wizard improvements in Builder for the modeling of low salinity water flooding. In terms of the empirical foam model in GEM, kind of along the same lines, what this does is it directly alters the gas relative permeability by use of a dimensionless foam parameter that's calculated based on the foam model. This removes the need to use multiple relative permeabilities with interpolation and simplifies the setup. The effect is important in order to capture the relationship between the strength of a foam and the effective permeability changes. We also have relative permeability table-based endpoint scaling. What this allows us to do is now have a second option for altering the relative permeabilities on a per block basis. Previously, we could go into each individual grid block and set up our own endpoint scaling based on rock type or whatever else. This allows us to actually put in a table that can have a couple different dependencies on it. For example, if you have a chemical EOR type process, you might need to have endpoints that change based on the surfactant concentration. You can now put in a recurrent modification of the table based on that. Oil well perm hysteresis has, of course, been around for quite a while in GEM. What we've done this year is incorporate hysteresis options into the liquid gas well perm curve, specifically on the drainage side. What this means is that you now have the ability of modeling the hysteresis effect on both drainage and imbibition curves on the liquid gas. This allows you to get a better accuracy for modeling this type of physical phenomena that we've actually seen in some cases in the field and core experiments. And finally, the ability to have interpolation of your relative permeability curves based on the capillary number, specifically the interfacial tension. By enabling a table relationship between interfacial tension and a key component's aqueous phase mole fraction, you can actually control the curve that is used. This is very important when you're dealing with chemical EOR processes or CO2 injection, where you could have things like a model wettability alteration and change in rel perm subsequently. Another example of this is, of course, that surfactant is known to decrease the oil-water interfacial tension, and so the residual oil saturation can decrease accordingly. And you can model that in a bit of a more easier way based on this interfacial tension effect. All right, from now I'm going to be jumping into CMOST, and CMOST is our tool coupled to the simulators, which can be used for history matching, optimization, uncertainty assessments, all with the end goal of optimizing your field, your operations, your overall workflow, and to make your life easier as a whole. The changes that we've made this year go right along those lines. The first one I'm going to talk about is the CMG Bayesian Engine Probabilistic Forecasting. Now, we actually gave a webinar on brownfield development and the CMG PAR probabilistic forecasting back in January. And that's available for viewing on our website right now. So after this presentation, if you have some time, I highly recommend taking a peek at that. I think you'll glean a lot of good information. Here today, though, I'm just going to touch on it briefly, give you a quick summary of it. Basically, the new CMG PAR method, PAR stands for Proxy-Assisted Acceptance Rejection Testing. What this does is it helps by finding possible optimal solutions based on a proxy analysis. You can start off with your base case, use a sensitivity analysis to get a firm understanding of the search space, and then it uses the proxy to help kind of narrow its way down to optimal solutions. You can see that on the plot on the left-hand side. The black dot on the y-axis was your base case, and all the blue dots are the cases it was running. You can then define some sort of optimal criteria, where underneath, let's say, 5% history match error, those are all the data sets that have an acceptable match in your case and could be considered possible history matches. The idea behind this is to get away from this concept of looking at one discrete realization and actually looking at a range of possible realizations instead, making things much more robust, taking into account a lot more of the uncertainty. You can then take those possible history match models and run them forward in a probabilistic forecasting sense, where now you're looking at not just one particular model out in the future, but a range of possible uncertainty based on your geology, based on whatever uncertain parameters you have. And this is how you get a firmer understanding of the possible outcomes for your actual field. This is where you get your P10, P50, and P90 values. From here, you can then move into a robust optimization stage, and this is another new piece that was added. What this does is it allows you to find an optimal risk-weighted solution that will work for any realization within your range of uncertainty. You know, let's say that I have 50 or 100 possible matches. Well, I can't necessarily say that any of those are more correct than the other because they all have the same amount of being, they were all flagged as being possible, possible matches. And so I need to find a way forward that incorporates all of those, that gives me the best possible, most optimal method, taking into account all that uncertainty. And that's what this does. To help with this, we actually have a new study manager, which helps you grab those data sets that you want to use, such as your P10, P50, P90 values, and sets up kind of this master relationship to it, which is utilized in running all of these and determining an optimal from them. So I'm just going to go through kind of a quick example of how this can all be applied. And this is using everything I just talked about. What you can typically do is start off with something like a sensitivity analysis, where you actually are looking at all the possible parameters you're uncertain about and determining which ones have the greatest possible effect on your particular problem or objective. You can then go in and use the new CMG PAR to history match your models. And from this, you would then go through and choose certain criteria to actually base your possible matches on. From this, you will get some number of matches. In this case, let's say 100. You can carry those forward into a probabilistic forecast. From there, you then get your P10, 50, 90, whatever else you want to use, and then you can carry those into a robust optimization, as I just mentioned. Using those models, you now can have an optimal operating condition, a single way forward. No matter what the geology is, this is the best option. And at the end of the day, run a complete uncertainty assessment with a probabilistic forecast on the optimized model, actually get your true field NPVs for these, and ensuring that no matter what you do, you have a risk-weighted solution that gives you the best possible result in your field. To help support this, we've also introduced some additional wizards in CMOS. There's a wizard for the probabilistic forecast, which helps prepare the master file, which CMOS requires. You can also use filters to select your experiments with the acceptable history match quality, as I previously mentioned. Also creating and forecasting the objective functions and setting up and running the engine and probabilistic forecast using the posterior samples that you get from the history match side. And then the robust study wizard, as I previously mentioned, we have the study manager, which helps you navigate the data sets that are associated with it. This, of course, can support both green and brownfield optimization. So not only can you do this on models that you have history matching for already, you can do this on models where you may not have, and fields you may not have any production history at all yet. You can do this for stuff where, you know, it's a brand new implementation and the uncertainty would be a lot greater possibly. So that's what makes this much more important. It decreases the risk in your operations on both new and old assets. This was actually another user request, which was the import for experiments directly from text. So what this allows you to do is take a listing of possible experiment tables from third-party software packages or whatever else, and the wizard will directly check the data, remove any errors. You'll be prompted, of course, and then subsequently brought in to CMOS accordingly to use for your sensitivity analysis. This eliminates the previous need to manually write some sort of Python script in order to bring this in instead. Another nice feature that was added was the new 5-star rating system of experiments. And what this allows you to do is actually specify criteria that will rank your models on a 0 to 5-star system. And so you can say, I want my models with the lowest water cut and the best oil production, lowest SOR to have a 5-star system, 5 stars, and then going down from there. And it'll actually highlight these accordingly and allow you to select different styles for the curves in order to get a better understanding of how and where these all kind of line next to each other in the different plots that you might be looking at. Moving into the pre-processing GUIs, I'm going to start with Builder. And we had a very, very nice addition this year, and that's the way that we can import production data using our data import wizard. Now, in the past, what we've typically done when you have field history is you would put it into some sort of production data file. You would then use the wizard in Builder to bring that in and select a parameter or constraint that you want the wells to run on, whether it was oil rate, water rate, or a liquid rate constraint. Now, while this wasn't necessarily incorrect, there was a possible better option we discovered, and that was the ability of running on a total reservoir bottom hole fluid rate constraint. So what we can now do is directly import all of the rates altogether, choose this option to use the total reservoir bottom hole fluid rate constraint, and it'll automatically determine this for us at each of the time steps. So no longer do we have to go through and manually make these changes or trying to do this calculations ourselves. It'll do it all for us. This makes the data importing much easier. It also reduces the model building time. And then at the end of the day, it gives us a much better understanding of how our model is matching to our history and allows us to really get into the history matching piece of trying to get the individual phase breakdowns between oil, water, and gas accordingly. We've had the ability from this previous year being able to import hydraulic fractures from third-party programs, such as Gopher, StimPlan, Frac Pro PT, Frac Geo, and Field Pro. What we can now do is import multiple hydraulic fractures per file, though. So rather than having to make one file for each individual one, you can now put them all into one, which greatly reduces the amount of time spent in this importation piece. We can also create and import fractures in both the transverse and longitudinal directions, which we previously could not do. This helps extend the fractures in multiple directions now, which increases the overall accuracy and matches better to how these other third-party programs were modeling the fracture creations. Also, the fracture conductivity can vary along the length and the height of the fracture. And this allows for, of course, more accurate data import, and it's different than the previous default, which was to set the fracture to an average perm value instead on the importation. And we'd have to go in after the fact and create a gradient ourselves. This way, the gradient for the conductivity can be directly brought in. Now, this feature I was particularly happy with. What this does is it actually utilizes the polygon tool, which was added to Builder a couple versions back. The polygon tool allows us to actually select a polygonal area inside Builder, and before it was used to change properties in that area. Now they've enhanced it to being able to actually pull out submodels. Previously, if you wanted to pull out a non-rectangular submodel, you would actually have to pull out a larger rectangular area and then null cells out individually yourself. This automatically does it for you now. So very, very welcome when you're looking at pulling out areas that are, again, odd-shaped or non-rectangular. Another nice tool that was added to Builder is the ruler tool. And this, just like it sounds, calculates the distance between any 2 points on the grid. But this is a bit more advanced than that because it works in 3D, meaning it gives distance in all 3 of the planes, the X, Y, and Z. So you can choose a point on one plane, point on a different plane, or the same one, and it'll give you the distance between those, both the direct aerial distance as well as some of the other trigonometric distances. We've also had large performance improvements in Builder. A significant speed up in the data reading time, meaning how long it takes Builder to open data sets, as well as doing things like saving and moving, manipulating your models. Part of this is a change in some of the defaults and preferences that we had when loading data sets. For instance, trajectories are not automatically displayed now. So if you want to go back and you absolutely have the option of being able to change these defaults yourself. If you have questions on how to do that, please feel free to contact our support and we'll be sure to walk you through it. As you can see here, though, in terms of a general performance improvement, I have 4 different models I'm showing from 4 million cells up to 97 million. And the overall opening time of these has greatly reduced, everything from 33% up to 71% reduction in just load time alone. Along those same lines, we've also had an improvement in the memory usage, and this one was very important. With the decreased need for the memory usage, we have seen a speed up for the rotation interaction in the 3D views. It also allows us, very importantly, to be able to open large data sets on machines that may not be previously optimal or capable of opening them. Maybe older machines or things of that nature, or the data set might have just been very, very large. So now you might have the ability of opening those data sets with this new version. And in terms of the overall reductions, we're seeing everything from 40 to 60% in models. And as you can see here, we have a 236 million cell model, had a almost 50% reduction in the memory requirement. So it makes it much easier to be able to manipulate a model of that size and caliber. And this is just a general kind of diagram of this performance improvement in Builder, just as a summary. This is 2 models here, one that's 21 million cells, the other one 17 million. And going from the 2015 to the 2016 version, we're seeing loading time, improvement by 50 to 60%, switching to 3D between 60 and 80%. Memory usage, like I mentioned, is in that 40% improvement range. Even closing time has reduced and improved by almost half. So great to see.
All right, we're going to take a quick break from the presentation to ask for some audience participation through a poll question. How often do you utilize a third-party software, for example, TextPad, for viewing and making changes to your data set? So please choose one of the options below, and then we'll move on following that. As you're all probably quite aware, as CMG uses an ASCII format, it gives us the opportunity to quality check our results and our builder data sets in third-party software. And as we can see from the poll and our attendance here, we're seeing that more than half of the audience uses it either often or always. So nice to see.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you all for participating in that poll. That actually leads in directly to my slide here on the new cEdit program. And for all of you that said often or always, I think you'll be very pleased with this. CMG has developed its own text editor specific for CMG data sets. What this does is it's optimized for the way that our data sets are structured and our keyword formats. This allows us to open files faster than any third-party software that's out there. We can also open files that are up to 10 gigabytes in size. TextPad, for instance, if you had a 3.6 gigabyte file as shown in that table, you wouldn't be able to load it even. You have to go to another large file editor, and trust me, I've used those. They can be quite cumbersome. cEdit is very easy to navigate. All the keywords are going to be color-coded. You can collapse large arrays. You can easily pull out data you want to put into include files. We also have a split window capability, which is something that some other third-party softwares don't have. Now, in terms of overall navigation time, I have a couple examples there on the right. For a model that's 700 megabytes, it may take you 110 seconds in TextPad. In the new cEdit, you're down to less than 2 seconds. That just gives you an idea of once something's optimized for you, how much of a benefit it can be. So this is available in the new 2016 version. I highly recommend anybody that likes using TextPad or one of these other third-party softwares, try this out. See how it is. Let us know if you have any suggestions or feedback to it. Lastly, I'm going to discuss some of the options that were added to WinProp this last year. And WinProp is our phase behavior PBT modeling software package. This is where you can actually bring in your laboratory data and create and match your equation of state to those experiments in order to generate PBT for the simulators. For those working in GEM, you'll definitely like this. We have a new liquid-liquid vapor phase behavior detection. What this does is it actually looks for the intermediate liquid phase in oil and gas injection systems, which can cause this liquid-liquid vapor region, this kind of multi-phase region. Now, this can actually lead to some convergence issues inside GEM when you start running into this, just due to the sheer complexity of what happens there in terms of the overall phase behaviors. So we have a tool that's now available in WinProp, not only to detect this, but also to help you remove that region and ensure a smooth GEM run. We also have two-phase envelope creations for pure components. Previously, if you wanted to do a two-phase envelope, you actually had to look at the kind of pseudoization of components or lumping. Now you can do it for pure components, being able to plot that pressure-temperature relationship. For IMEX related data sets, we have the ability to now look at negative compressibility checks. And so when you're creating some sort of black oil PBT table, there's sometimes cases you might run into where just based on the way that the equations are calculating the table, you can end up in this strange area where you have a negative oil compressibility. What this does is it, like with the liquid vapor piece, it checks for these and then corrects for it for you and helps troubleshoot any of those issues. So that way when you bring this into IMEX, you shouldn't see any of those warnings or errors. And viscosity and density plots can now be plotted for STARs systems. And so if you have a STARs dead oil density and viscosity, you can now look at that over a range of pressures and temperatures. Previously, it was very difficult to do this because of the fact that it was a dead oil, right? By definition, it's not going to have a multi-phase state. So now you're actually able to look at those calculations, as well as the ability to plot the live oil viscosity and the apparent viscosities of individual components. For those of you that are unaware of the methodology of STARs, when you input gas properties, for instance, you're actually inputting them as an apparent liquid viscosity and density of the gas property, not just the straight gas-associated viscosity, gas phase viscosity. So you can actually plot those in WinProp now to get a firmer understanding of your PBT before moving into STARs.
Thanks, Jeremy. We're now ready to answer some of the audience questions. If you have any questions and have not yet submitted them, you can do so now using the chat window on your screen. We also have Turf Tacker here with us from our Consulting Support and Training Group to help us answer some questions. So the first question we're going to ask is from Jose, and it's, is results graph and results 3D still available in the 2016 release?
Yeah, Jose, both results graph and 3D are available in this release. The new results is also available. In terms of the output files, by default you will be seeing both the IRF, MRF, and the new SR3 formats. But if you only want to use one of those in particular, either the older IRF, MRF, or the newer SR3, you can actually default your simulation runs to output one or the other instead of both.
We have a question from Kent, And the question is, how much of the speed improvement in thermal cases were the results of parallelization of dilation and compaction, well flow, and others? In other words, if my current model don't use or incorporate those physics, would the speed up you have described be typical?
Hi, Kent. So, yeah, definitely having the parallelization of the code, the dilation and well flow, everything will enhance the speed, but that's not the only reason you see the speed up in STARs. There's other parts of the codes that have been sped up, including the building of the Jacobian. So there is an inherent speed up going from the 2015 to the 2016 release. You definitely will see a speed up there.
All right, we have a question from Jill, and the question is, for the ruler tool, how exactly is the distance calculated?
So for the ruler tool, the distance is going to be calculated just based on the pure Pythagorean theorem, just basic trigonometrics, and so basic trigonometry. It's able to calculate based on the points that you're looking at, the angle, and then the associated distances accordingly.
Okay, we have a question from Mark, and Mark asks, can I import experiments from Excel into CMOS now?
Yes, the new ability to import the experiments from third-party applications into CMOS can be used directly from Excel, as well as things such as TextPad or even some of the third-party software. So you have quite a bit of flexibility there to bring in your own experiments.
Okay, we have a question from Collins, and he asks, rescue models built with third-party packages sometimes do not import successfully in the 2015 version. Do we have any improvements on this for 2016?
Hi, Colin. So we've worked hard to improve the rescue import process, and so there definitely are improvements in terms of importing different rescue models, and you should have no problems really importing any sort of rescue models into Builder. Also, we've introduced a new ability to import even ResQML models, which is the newest version of Rescue. So if you're trying to import ResQML, you can do that through Builder as well now.
We have a question from Mohammed, and the question is the soft steam constraint only for rate, or can it also be applied to the steam trap constraint?
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. The new soft constraints can actually be applied to both the rate and the steam trap control. So not only in the field if you're basing it on a subcool, but if you're also basing it on the actual steam production, you can do either in the model. And again, like I said, it's based on the actual methodology that's used in controlling the chokes for the way that the soft steam is set up.
So we have a question from Tony, and Tony asks, why have geochemistry in STARs when you already have it in GEM?
Thanks, Tony. The geochemistry that was added to STARs was done so because many of the chemical type EOR processes that people are looking at these days, they're realizing more and more they have geochemical effects that are occurring. And so with that, we thought it best to be able to add this functioning in there because of the fact that STARs has historically been our simulator for those types of chemical and advanced process modelings. The other main piece of that also has to do with the thermal effects. STARs is able to model thermal, and when you have some types of steam production, things of that nature, you can also have a geochemical effect there, which can be taken into account.
All right, we have time for just one more question, and the question is from Edgar, and the question is, how can I get cEdit?
So as I mentioned, cEdit should be installed with the new version of the software. And so as soon as you install the new version, you should see it available to use for your data sets. As far as I know, I don't think there's any constraints on the type of data set you can use it with.
Thank you for your questions. That'll wrap it up for today as we're almost out of time. If your question wasn't answered during the Q&A session, we'll follow up with you within the next couple of days. I hope you gained a better understanding of the powerful enhancements and capabilities in our new release. Updates presented included how the models are constructed, process-based options for thermal, EOR, and unconventional workflows, as well as runtime and memory improvements, and the new options available for analyzing results. Overall, this version includes many updates that increase the value of simulation to your organization. We'll post today's recorded presentation to our website, and we'll send you a link within 24 hours. CMG offers a multitude of training courses for all skill levels. We also offer company-specific customized courses on a variety of other subjects all around the world. For more information on our training courses offering, please visit our website at www.cmgl.ca. If you have any questions related to presented today or would like to know more about our product offerings, please email us at sales@cmgl.ca. Again, thank you for all joining us today for our webinar on what's new in the general release, and we look forward to connecting with you again.